Dr. Tom Wetland. It is an honor to have you on the Unbroken podcast. I have long wanted to bring someone who can whistleblow and explain the whole birth certificate tax, the fact that we're under martial law since 1933 and all this, the sort of legal system and the trickery within it that we're all kind of living under right now. So thank you very, very much for being willing to be interviewed today.
You're welcome. Glad to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
So because of my own experiences with the Vatican, I'd love to start there if that's okay with you, and kind of find out from you if you could explain the Vatican and the birth certificates and what they are doing there with all of us.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Vatican because the church, was I think originated around 800 AD, right? The Catholic Church, and that's when the popes and everything come into play. At that time, of course, there was no type of birth registration or birth recording, but the church did baptize,
Mm,
right? And
right.
you got a baptismal certificate. I don't know if you were ever baptized, but I was brought up Roman Catholic, went to Catholic school. So, yes, I was baptized shortly after birth.
Yes.
Now, the baptism certificate is almost identical to the birth certificate. So, I'm just going to touch on that just for a second.
Okay.
When they do the baptism certificate, the Vatican is making a claim on your soul. Okay. It's just a claim. They're it's a claim. This is what you got to understand with trust law is they're just making a claim. But if no one else has made a claim on your soul, other than, of course, our creator, in the system, it looks like they have the superior claim. So they look at anyone that's been baptized as a citizen of Vatican City. So technically, under their, if you were to go back into their records, you would find that you have citizenship in under the Vatican City, citizenship type of thing. Okay, unless you rescind it, you rebut it, or send them a letter, it is presumed, and that's what all of this today is. What people talk of color of law. It really isn't reality. Everything is presumed to be a certain way, and then, of course, because of free will, you have the right to rebut or say, no, that's not true. But if you don't, legally or under the color of law, you've accepted. So
Okay.
this is the problem with everything that is presumed, they treat as fact when it isn't as fact. And what they're waiting for you to do is come forward as a responsible adult and either deny that or rebut those claims. Does that help?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I call implied consent. If you're not saying no, you are
Okay.
therefore consenting. Okay.
Okay. So what is an implied consent? It's a trust agreement. Okay.
Oh,
That's a trust, whether it's implied or expressed. It doesn't have to be expressed and written down. It's implied by the actions of the parties. Okay. And all trusts are contracts until rescinded or rebutted. This is why trust law governs the universe. It governs the planet. It governs every country on earth. Okay. This is what law form we're really under. Okay. All treaties are trust. Okay, because it's the actions of the parties. Really, you can have these written agreements, but it's really the actions of the parties that deem everything under law. You've heard of common law marriages, right? Where they might not get legally married, but the court would look at that as, hey, you live together, you share a bank account, therefore it's implied you're married. Do you see what I mean?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so now let's get to the birth certificate issue. So that's actually fairly recent in the last 130 years or so, but in early 1900s, and yes, the Vatican's behind this, because the Vatican in 1871 created a Delaware corporation called the United States of America, Inc. to be the trustees of our 1789 Constitutional Trust. Okay, so that's why they had the authority to do this. So they started recording births. Now, how did they incentivize people to do this? Well, think of again, this is early 1900s. They offered female federal employees a week paid vacation if they would record their births at the county. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
we paid that. People did it for that.
Yeah, but it got it started. You see that
Yeah.
you just like today, if Trump says I'm going to give you a free $2,000 check, everybody's going to line up for it, right? This is just
Yeah.
typical human behavior.
Well, it reminds me of the free French fries if you get jabbed.
Yeah, it's really not free. See, in a trust agreement, when you accept something, now you have the beneficiary, now you have duties and obligations. Now that contractually obligated you to certain things. And this is why the church, the banks, the governments love trust agreements because they never have to divulge the details of the trust. You, as an adult, are supposed to be aware of the conditions that are attached. So they're out. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just telling you how they think.
Right.
So they're like, well, you took it. You should have known what's going to
Yes.
happen if you take it. See? So
Yes.
that's why they usually look at it. They have no moral responsibility because they always look at you as you should have known, right?
Correct. Correct.
Haven't you ever heard of the phrase, ignorance is no excuse at all?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what they mean by that. Okay.
Yes.
So early 1900s, everybody starts doing this. Same thing with employees. Then record the birth turns into registering the birth. Okay. Now I know it sounds the same, doesn't it? Well, guess what? It's not really the same. All
Yeah.
right. But technically, your name is recorded, but it's not. It's registered. Now, register comes from the term regal, which means give to the king, to give you an idea. So anytime you register something, especially in the public, what you're doing is forming a trust. You're giving up in a trust. The title of the asset is divided. They used to call this divided title when they had kings and queens and monarchs, right? Okay. Where the king said, I own all the land by divine right, but I'm going to let you work on the land, right? In order to do that, there's obligations. You have to pay me rent, you have to give me a share of the crops, and you and your sons all have to fight for me if we're at war. You see, again, a trust relation. Serfdom, fiefdom is all a trust. Okay. You're accepting a benefit, but at the time you do that, you're contractually being obligated to military service, paying taxes, da 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 da. Okay. This has been going on for thousands of years. This this is how the few control the masses. Okay.
Yeah.
So now the name is registered, which means it's placed in trust. Okay. So now the government has a claim on your name or the baby's name. Okay. So and I won't ask you your age, but I'm old enough to know that there was no CPS when I was a kid. It was
Yeah.
unheard of. No one ever had it. You could go out and play and whatever. So, anyways, when did CPS really come along? Well, after 1981. Okay,
Yeah.
because prior to 81, when you got your Social Security number, okay, it wasn't until you started working. Okay. So around 14 years old, I wanted to work at a grocery store, bagging groceries. They said you have to go down to Social Security to get a Social Security number, right? Okay. Well, then again, you're being registered into another trust. They don't tell you this again. Remember what I said about they don't divulge the details. When you apply for the benefit of Social Security, you're agreeing that you're going to be liable for income tax for the rest of your life. Now, nowhere was that stated, right? In the details, it's not written down. You're supposed to know that as somebody under the age of 18, that this contractually obliges you to do all of this. Do you see how they operate? Would you call that deception?
I would absolutely call that deception, and I know how deceptive these creatures, as I call them, are. I mean, even what you said earlier, that the king says, "Well, I own the land by divine right of king." I mean, even that's a bunch of horse shit. That's a
Of
deception
course.
right there.
Right.
Yeah,
But it's implied. Remember, you brought up the word. Everybody just thinks that's the way things are done. But in
right.
reality, it really isn't. So after
Okay.
1981, they started signing babies up for Social Security. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then immediately register the name, place it in trust. That means the government's the trustee that has the authority now to say, well, we have a claim on that child's name. It really isn't a claim on the child, it's a claim on the child's name. Therefore, if we think something's being happened to that name, we have the authority to come in and take the child away from the parents. Okay. It's implied authority, implied that they have an interest in that child when really it's just an interest in the child's name. Now, how do you counteract that? Well, the parent who actually granted the name to the child, another trust that was created, actually has a superior claim because they're the ones that created it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So in their legal system, they have a list of five claims in order of who's the superior. And a claim by nature is number one. Okay, so you have a right to your name by a claim by nature because your parents granted to you. You have their DNA. Okay, their claim by legal characteristic is like number three. Okay, so again, let's think of it. They're looking in the computer. We're the only ones that have a claim. So obviously, we're the highest authority. But you're supposed to unknowingly file a claim. It's called on a UCC1 that you actually, as a parent, have the higher claim to the child's name than they do. And then they back off because what you're saying is that's my property, not yours. You can't do with it as you want to do with it. Okay.
Okay.
Now let me ask you a couple questions. Can even when I did this when I was 14, can a 14-year-old child enter into contract with the Social Security Administration and that be legal? No.
No, you
So what does
can't
that tell
vote,
you?
you can't own a gun, you can't, so why would you be able to do that? Well, nowadays you can change your gender, but that's new. Yeah.
Well, again, it's not reality, right? It's implied that you can do that. Here we go again, right? Assumed you can, but you really can't. So they in their system, because they all don't want to go to jail and they all don't want to be hanged, they have this opening for anybody that wants to understand and know this and learn this, that I can claim fraud because fraud has no statute of limitations
Okay.
in their system. So, and fraud is an equitable remedy. You can go back and undo what they did, okay,
Okay.
because it was fraudulent. Okay, because, and again, think about this today. Can a baby, a 1 day old baby, contract into Social Security? That's ludicrous to think, and to think that does the mom even have a legal right to make that child liable for any? No, it's not possible. Even in their system, which you think is corrupt as heck, even they can't do it. So what they've done is left the back door open for everybody, but you've never known the back door was there, let alone it was open that you could go through it. Does
Yeah,
that
they
help?
hide that.
Yeah.
So now, so they sign the baby up for Social Security, therefore making that person liable for future taxes.
Mhm.
Now, is there somewhere where they're telling us that, or is that just not, are they not saying it and we should somehow know? Like, is there some way where that's recorded?
Yes, but
Okay.
it's recorded as this, as that a U.S. citizen is responsible for all debt. Oh, have
Oh,
you ever read the 14th Amendment?
okay.
14th Amendment in 1868 said citizens of the United States, and this is Section 1, Part 4, okay, are responsible for the national debt, okay? But are you a U.S. citizen or are you a Union State citizen? Are you a Californian where you really have your rights, or are you, in other words, you are given two citizenships? Did anybody ever tell you that? No.
No.
You have the free will and volunteerism to declare which one you want to be. Which one do you think is better and which one do you think is bad? Okay, one, you're volunteering into their system every time you say, yep, I'm a US citizen. But if you say I'm an Illinoisan or I'm a Californian, I'm a Floridian, then you're saying I'm not part of that system. Okay.
Interesting.
There's more to it, but that's the general idea that they've given you the opportunity to choose. even though you don't know you have a choice all the time. And see, that's their back door. Everything's got a back door to it. Everything's got an opening a mile wide. You don't see it because you don't even know it's there. Okay. And because everything that's in a trust agreement, they don't have to tell you, you're expected to know because you've accepted these benefits.
Mm. So, what is then the straw man that people hear so much about? And I've heard it also said as there's a difference, and I sort of maybe heard that when you said it's the baby's name, not the baby, like the difference between the name and the living person.
Yes. Okay. So let's pretend you're in your mother's womb. Okay. And you're connected with the umbilical cord to the placenta, the chorion. You're one whole unit. Okay. You're like a one ball. When you come through the birth canal, what happens? The baby comes down. It's connected to the umbilical cord. Have you had children?
Yes,
Okay,
one.
so you know what this is. So the thing is hanging there, the umbilical cord. And me being a medical doctor, I've delivered 125 babies when I was training, so I know what I'm talking about. So you cut the umbilical cord, right? You separate it from the placenta and the chorion, and then that comes out maybe about 15 minutes later, right? It's like having two deliveries. The child comes first, and then everything else comes later. Okay. So the baby comes out. The parents give it a name, grant it. I'm going to use the right words here because, again, it's granted into trust. They grant the child a name. Kind of, let's think of the baby goes that way. Okay. You're separating. You got one thing that goes this way. The placenta comes down. Now, being a mother, I know your legs are up and you don't really see what's going on, but the placenta, when it comes out and the umbilical cord are still beating, okay? Because it's trying to pump all of the blood from the placenta into the baby, okay? So it is, quote, I'm going to use a term that they use, born alive, but presumed to die. You would agree with that, okay?
Suppose, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that, and then, it's left there on the floor or they throw it away. So again, it is presumed to be abandoned property. Okay. Now, whose DNA is sitting there on the floor or in the trash bag now? Well, the baby's DNA, and some of it also is the mother's DNA, right? Okay. So, based on the law of the sea, commerce, somebody is throwing away an asset or property. So, the state comes in. I'm going to make a claim on that property, that abandoned property. And if nobody claims it, then we'll keep the claim on it. Like if you find buried treasure or whatever in the sea, right? You think it's yours until somebody else could come along and make a stronger claim, like the country of Spain. Let's say you found some doubloons or whatever, in the ocean. And then you get your picture in the paper, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the country of Spain's taking you to court saying that's actually our property because right there on that coin is printed and that's really ours. Do you see what you can do to fix it? Okay, so they make a claim, but when they make a claim, then they give it a name. Now, because it's presumed to die, they give it your name, but because it's presumed to die, it's done in all caps. Okay.
Okay.
Now they take that entity, and each state sends that information to the Department of Vital Records in the birth capital city, and they make a sole corporation out of it. Sole corporation is a corporation of one. Okay. I'll get to the definition. I'll find it in just a second. Okay. But it's very important.
As you're looking, I find it interesting that the word soul, SOUL, is the same as SOLE, which is what you're talking about right
That's
now.
what they talk about as SOLE. So you get it. Okay. Uh, all right. So they give it the all caps name. All right. That's the straw man. That's the name. It's a piece of paper with your name on it held in trust in all caps. Okay. That was the reason it was created is so you could play the game of Monopoly. Okay. Now, have you ever played the game of Monopoly? Oh,
Yes,
mostly everybody has. Okay. So you would agree that in the game of Monopoly that you got to use, or normally you got to use a game piece to play, right? You got to take a shoe, a cane, or a top hat, right? So you can move it around the board. You really can't play the game without a game piece, can you?
I
Okay.
suppose, yeah. You could
Well,
bring your own in, but yeah.
we're gonna get. Thank you for saying that. You're one of the first ones ever to say that. Okay, that you can. I'll come back to that. A corporate sole, a legal entity consisting of a single incorporated office occupied by a single natural person. Okay. So they're going to
Okay.
assume you're going to volunteer. We're going to give you this for your benefit so you can do commerce because in the commercial world, they're all artificial entities. They're all in the C jurisdiction. We're in the constitutional original. We're not in the same jurisdiction. So we can't interact with each other. So they give us this entity so we can have a bank account, so we can have a driver's license, so we can buy a house, so we can buy a car. Otherwise, we can't play the game without a game piece. You can't stand at the board and go, just look, watch what happens. Okay? You would agree. So this game piece was created for you because now everything, pretty much everything is commercial, right?
Yeah. So
Including the,
basically, I
yeah,
just want to, so because we're engaging in commerce and it's kind of an artificial realm, we have to have like a game piece to play that game.
that's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Because you can't play. They can't see you. They cannot see you without the game piece. I'll
Okay.
give you an example. There was a girl named Faith Pennington, born in Texas, on a Mennonite community where she was born at home, just was witness, no midwife, no nothing. The state never knew she even existed. Okay. So there's a community, where they grow up, they marry each other and whatever. So, but she's one of 8 children. So she says whatever, through her grandma, she's like, I want to live with my grandma in Austin. I want to go to school. I want to go to college. I want to drive a car. The parents go, no, you're staying here. We're not doing any of that stuff. Okay. So the grandparents talk the parents when she's 18 to come live with them. So she goes there, tries to enter into school. What do you think happens? They go, who are you? Okay. You don't have a driver's license. She goes to the driver's license. They go, well, who are you? You need a social security number. Goes to the Social Security office. They go, well, you need a birth certificate. She goes, I don't have a birth certificate. I was born at home. Okay. So do you see what really would happen is she can't do anything because she's not in the commercial system. You see how crazy this is. All right. So one of the representatives gets a wind of this, and actually, she does a podcast. She goes, I'm the girl that doesn't exist. So there's a YouTube thing on this. And I just thought it was hilarious in a way, but it was serious. Okay. Because she was asking people, is there anybody out there that can help me? Because I can't do anything. All right. It's like she's invisible. So the Texas legislature tried to make her a citizen. Guess what? They were told, can't do that. No, no, no. So finally, one of the aunts agrees. Oh, then somebody says, one of the judges says, look, if you had an affidavit with 2 witnesses to the birth, then we could probably get you a birth certificate. Okay, which again is telling you that's what gets you in the system. Okay, so she talks 2 of the aunts into signing an affidavit. She finally gets that, finally gets a birth certificate, what they call amended one later. She finally gets her driver's license. She finally gets to go to college. She becomes part of the collective. Okay, but she couldn't do any of it without that birth certificate, that state birth certificate. Do you see?
Hi, everyone. I want to invite you to my upcoming seminar, The End of the Matrix and the Birth of a New Era: How to Revoke Consent and Reclaim Our Power. We're living in a time of massive transition right now on Earth. The great spiritual war between the light and dark forces that has been going on for eons is actually ending right now. Hence all these predictions and prophecies of the quote end times that we see out there. In fact, the Mayans predicted the quote end of the world in 2012. But due to a timeline extension, this new era is manifesting right now. Let's be clear though, these are the end times for the satanic global cult and their predatory systems, and actually a new beginning for humanity. In the seminar, I'm going to explore how revoking consent, compliance, and participation with their evil mandates and agendas can free humanity. We're going to look at the role of free will and how does the cult reveal their nefarious plans and actions in an effort to garner our consent? What can we do in the face of their control, manipulation, and threats? Who are we really? And how do we activate our dormant superpowers? How do we individually and collectively manifest our future? These are really important questions to navigate as we look right in front of our faces at the end of the dark, parasitic, artificial matrix and the birth of a higher dimensional Earth and our return as a human race to organic reality. Thanks for joining me. So that's her game piece.
That's the game piece. Now, do you want me to tell you how to fix it? Or we'll do that later?
Um, well, since we're talking about that very specific thing, it's up to you. What do you think? We could
I'll
just do
give
it
you
now.
a quick 2 minute. We won't go into it in depth. The
Okay.
rules of the game don't say you can't create your own
Um,
game piece. But did anybody tell you that? Okay, so you can create a private trust that is your game piece that allows me to have all of these things, but that game piece is not in their jurisdiction. So when I play the game, if I move around and I land on boardwalk with a hotel and they say, well, you owe $1,000, I say, well, no, I'm not because I'm not in your, sorry, I'm not in your jurisdiction.
okay.
I don't have the liability. Okay. So you can do it.
Without a birth certificate and all that?
No, you cannot get rid of it. You have to convey. In other words, whose property is the name? Who has the highest superior claim?
Okay.
You do. So you have to claim it, then you have to convey it. So you're going to take it out of their straw man trust and you're going to convey it into a private trust. Now, what gives you the right? Because it's my property.
Right.
Okay. And yes, they've made a claim on it, but I have to on paper say, no, 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 my claim is by nature, it is superior to yours. Thus, I have control of the game piece now, not you.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it's
And
like
that,
taking responsibility and taking action, taking control of your life.
yeah, and that makes sense to me because natural law supersedes any man-made law. So that makes
And
sense to
natural
me.
law is trust law,
Okay.
in case you
Okay.
don't know. And trust law, natural law is God's law.
Yes. Yes. So you mentioned jurisdiction. That was something on my list to ask you to explain to people what that is.
Okay. Jurisdiction, people unfortunately think of jurisdiction as a geographical thing, right? If you're in another country, quote, you're in a different jurisdiction. Well, yes and no. In today's commercial world, you can contractually agree to be in a different jurisdiction, even though if I'm standing in the state of Florida, I can contract and make it appear that I'm actually in Washington, D.C. Okay. Yes. Okay. There are two jurisdictions going on in this country, and there always have been. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Real quick. There's the Union States. That's what the Constitution is for. That's Article 3, that we call that original land jurisdiction, right? Then the place that runs it is called Washington, D.C. Is Washington, D.C. a state of the Union? Nope. So the only conclusion you can make is it has to be in a different jurisdiction, doesn't it? Because we can't really tell it what to do. Okay. So we have the DC, we call territorial jurisdiction, and Puerto Rico, Samoa, Guam, those are all territories. And every state was actually a territory before became a union, right? So they have territorial jurisdiction, which is separate from union jurisdiction. Okay. And I've probably got 10 US Supreme Court cases that tell you that exact thing without a doubt. Okay. I'll give you an example. US Supreme Court 1818, US versus Bevins, establishes two separate jurisdictions within the United States of America, the federal territorial DC zone and the geographical union state jurisdiction. So I'm telling you, you didn't know it. Again, you're not told this, you're not knowledgeable of this. Two different jurisdictions going on. And you can look at it as there's a commercial jurisdiction, which is the territorial jurisdiction, and there's the state jurisdiction. Okay. They run along parallel to each other, just like the Matrix, the movie The Matrix. You can jump from one to the other. Neo did it by getting on the telephone, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, could you call the telephone a transmitting utility? Yes. Okay. So guess what your straw man is? It's the transmitting utility that allows you to jump from one jurisdiction to the other.
Oh,
Okay. You're using it if you want to get over here because they can't see you over here. Think of Faith Pennington. They really cannot see you. They can only see your entity. Okay. And everybody thinks you and your name are the same thing. And I'm telling you, they're completely different legal entities. You are not your name. Your name is your property. And right now
oh.
they're controlling your property, your name, by controlling you. That's how they control you. So you have to get control of that name. Would that make sense?
Yeah, that would make sense. Do they tell you how to own your own name? Of course not, I
They
guess.
don't tell us anything. You got to figure it out. Luckily, I'm one of those people that have figured it out.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and you teach people
I teach you
we'll
how to
have
do it.
okay, we'll have all your information for people who want to take your class, which I actually want to. So that is very evil and clever.
It's very deceptive, isn't it?
My goodness. So that makes me think of when you go to court. I've always thought of that was an interesting name for it. So it because you play games on a court. But you go to court and the first thing they ask you is your name. So is
Yes.
there some trickery there?
Absolutely. You ask such good questions. I can't believe it. That's the deception. Okay. So when
Okay.
they created this trust when you were a baby now, okay, it's called the Sesta K Trust, but it's really the trust with your all caps name on it. Okay. And somebody, like a police officer, made a charge against that trust, that name. They made a claim on that name, right?
Right.
Now, normally in trust law, natural law, only a beneficiary can make a claim on a trust, not a trustee. Only the trustee is the liable party, the beneficiary is the like trust fund baby, he gets all the money and all the assets, right? He gets to enjoy everything. So trust has been made. The clerk creates a trust when she creates the court case. They walk in the door. The judge is supposed to be non-biased, right? She's supposed to be an administrator. But if you're handling a charge against the trust, what you really want to know is, okay, I got two people here. Which one is the trustee? Which one's the beneficiary? Because one of them's liable and the other one's going to get the money. Which one is it? Right? So his job is really to find out who the parties are. All right. Now, normally, under normal conditions, the trustee is usually represents the trust in court, normally. Okay. So when he says, "Are you Mrs. Anderson?" Okay, are you Susan Anderson? What he's really asking you is, are you the trustee to the Susan Anderson trust that we've got in our computer here? Okay. So if you say the word yes, what did you just do? You just said, I'm guilty and I'll pay. Just by saying the word yes, it's over. It's already over. Okay.
So what
Now,
do
if
you
you,
say?
I'm here on special and ministerial visitation, and I'm the beneficiary. Okay. Now, once you grab, it's like playing musical chairs, and there's one chair there. The prosecutor and you, who gets to sit down first? Whoever claims beneficiary position gets to sit down. Now, let's say again, let's back up. When you say yes, then he's going to go, well, if you're the trustee, well, then the other guy must be the beneficiary. It's all implied. It's not said, it's not written down, it's implied. Okay. Which means you got to pay him or the state of Texas of whatever who he's representing. Right. Now, I want to send you the what we call the 12 maxims of Roman civil law, because that's what's going on in court is Roman civil law. And the first thing on number 8 is just by appearing, it is presumed you're the trustee unless you immediately rebut. Okay. So
Even that.
all you have, again, free will. You have to, I rebut. I'm not the trustee or implied surety, which means you think I am, but I'm really not. I'm the beneficiary. You know what? If I'm beneficiary, that must be the trustee. So that's really the guy you're looking for. And he's representing the state. The state created the name. Yeah, I think that's your guy, not me. Now that you have who you know all parties are, now I think you can settle the matter, Your Honor.
That is
Yes.
so beyond sneaky.
Oh, it's deception on a 10th level, but it's all trust law going on. It's all understanding trust law, which is God's law, natural law. You have to understand this is what's going on everywhere. They're trying to trick you. You're always really the beneficiary of all of this stuff, but they're putting a piece of paper. Will you please sign and say you're the trustee? Because once you sign, then you've got the liability and not us. It's the hot potato. Like you said, court, they're hitting the ball to you and you took it. You have to hit the ball back to them by, I'm the beneficiary. You see the analogy.
What would happen if, say, you went to court and you knew what to say and you said that? What, at that point, what would they do? Would they just,
Usually
would the thing
dismiss the
be
case.
over?
Yeah, it'd be over. Because if you're not the beneficiary and you're making a claim on the trust, that is fraud upon the court. You see, that's why they won't bring in the ticket as evidence, because that would be fraud. They're claiming that they are the beneficiary of the trust.
Okay,
Did
so
anybody ever wonder why the ticket's not in the court case? Because they
you
would
mean
go to,
like you mean like a speeding ticket or something?
yes, they would be committing a crime by saying they're the beneficiary when they know they're not. They're really the trustee. You're the beneficiary, but if you want to take the trustee position, then they will assume the beneficiary position and get paid. But if they come in to claim, if they come in with a sign, hey, now they're under commercial liability, now they've committed fraud. That's why they'll never do it. You see, it's a game. It's just a game. It's a theater going on.
So that's just a little bit of an interesting sidebar, if you don't mind. I want to ask about that. Let's say I get a speeding ticket or a ticket because they claim, now they have cameras anywhere. Actually, my daughter had this situation where she got something in the mail and it says that she didn't stop at a red light. She
Uh-huh.
says she did, and then she turned right because there was no sign saying you couldn't turn right. And so she said to me, that's not fair because that's not true. So are we even liable to pay these tickets, or is that also a deception?
No, they want you to volunteer to pay the ticket. Okay. So those kind of cases are actually the most simplest to beat because you say, "Oh, I looked your company name up. It's on Dun and Bradstreet." Well, funny thing is, only corporations are listed there, so you must be a corporation. And then if you're a corporation, there must be some contract between you and me. I don't remember ever signing a contract between me and your traffic code enforcement agency. Okay, please provide that, and then please provide the name of the person that's going to testify, because a picture is hearsay evidence. It's not firsthand perfected knowledge. I can't cross-examine it. So who's actually going to be testifying under oath, under penalty of perjury, under full commercial liability? Next thing you know, we've dismissed this case. I've got, let me give you, I just have one from one of my students. Just
Okay.
last week, he sent me this. Same thing of a decision on a traffic thing with a camera. They sent them back a receipt for the ticket, offense location and time, plate, whatever. Fine amount, zero. Okay. After we send in the paperwork. Okay. Because all you have to do is rebut and say, time out. Let's back up here. Am I under some kind of contract that compels me to perform? Because I'm unaware of it. Because you're implying there is. Can you produce any evidence there is? You see the back door now. You see the out every time. You have to rebut what their presumption is. They're presuming you have a contract with them that allows them to charge you. I know
So
it's like
again,
Alice in Wonderland and the Looking Glass. There's nothing is really real.
yeah.
Nothing is
No,
what
but
it
it
appears to
goes
be.
it goes back to that very nefarious idea that it's implied consent. It's because you're not, I mean, so we literally have to say no to everything. Oh,
Yes,
goodness.
that's the way the system is.
Okay. So let's jump from there to taxes and how they're also, I guess, voluntary.
Yes, because you have to go back. When did they start doing this? 1895, called the Pollock v. Farmer case. They tried to induce a income tax on the people. Okay. U.S. Supreme Court says no, that's unconstitutional. You absolutely positively cannot do it. But they said you can tax federal privilege, which means if you get permission to do something for the government, or you're working for the government, the federal government, or you live in DC where that other jurisdiction is, then yes, you have to pay income taxes because you're getting a privilege to either live there or working for them, kind of a thing. It's a privilege called a federal privilege. Okay. Now, when get back to the birth certificate, when you get the sole corporation, that's a federal privilege. You're getting a privilege of a trust, a benefit to do commerce. Thus, we infer you must be a resident of Washington, D.C. in order to do that. Thus, now you're taxable. That's the interpretation. It really is. I'm giving you what their thinking is. The 16th Amendment didn't say they could tax people, they could tax persons. And artificial entities are persons. Okay. So they can tax a corporation. That's constitutional, perfectly by the rules of the book. Okay. They can tax businesses, LLCs, S Corp, C Corp, sole corporations, DB. They can tax corporations because that's a federal privilege, but they cannot tax the people. So as crazy as what I'm going to tell you, you were never really liable for income tax ever. Your all cap straw man sole corporation is really the taxable person, okay? And you have just volunteered to pay his taxes for him because he's bankrupt and he can't. Now, what do we call that in law? We call that a surety. A surety is a person that volunteers to take on the debt or obligation of another. Let me give you an analogy. If you had a 16-year-old son wanted to buy his own car, borrow some money, the bank would say, hey, look, he's 16. I need a co-signer. Would mom or dad, would you be willing to co-sign in case he doesn't pay, that you'll pay, right? So everybody understands that. It's a banking concept, okay? So that's what a surety is. A surety is the secondarily liable person, not the primary liable person. It really isn't your debt. You're just kind of agreeing to pay because he can't pay, okay? So again, now think about this. When you've ever done a 1040, do they tell you how much tax you owe? No, they have you to self-determine what you think you owe, right? By calculating on their tax tables. Now here's where they get you to contract for the tax, the standard or the itemized deduction. Okay. Are you taking a benefit? By taking the benefit of the standard deduction, 6,500, or itemized deductions of 30,000, whatever it is. Okay. That's that's the trust agreement. You're saying, I will pay. I'm just going to pay less because I'm accepting the benefit of the deductions. Okay.
And you could
Well,
say, I don't want to pay at all.
right. You could fill out a 1040, say, I don't want any deductions. I'm putting zero because I really didn't make the money. My corporation did. So everything's a zero. That's what we do. Everything's just zeroed out because everything is just estimated. Think of the word estimated. Okay. Now, if you've ever looked, you ever had a 1099 or a W-2? Okay. Usually at the top, there's a box, an empty box, and it says the word corrected. Okay. And I'm sure no one's told you this. You can correct those W-2s or 1099s. You check the box and you cross it off to whatever you think is right. Okay. Because they're making their decisions based on that information that, again, is not firsthand perfected knowledge, just hearsay. How do they know whether it's true or not? See, and they give you, again, think like they think. They gave you the opportunity to correct it and you didn't. So it must be true. They imply and assume it's true because you were given the opportunity to say, no, it wasn't, and you didn't. Thus, now you say you will pay, you take the benefit, now you're liable. Do you see the game?
That's very, that's very sneaky. They're saying, well, if you take this little bit, then we'll take
Yes,
this whole lot from you. But you can
yes,
have a little bit of what we're taking back.
yes.
Okay.
You- When
So
they
with
dangle the
these,
carrot in front of your face,
right,
buyer beware. That means there's strings attached that you cannot see. Okay?
right. That's always the case.
Yes.
So when a person goes to a job, let's say they're, I don't know, working in a restaurant, usually nowadays the company that you go work for will say that you have to fill out these different forms.
Hmm.
Is that itself true? Do you have to fill them out and put in zero? Or is there
Well,
even an option not to fill them out? Because
there isn't
usually
an
they won't
option.
hire you.
Correct. There is an option not to fill it out. So to do commerce, you have to fill out the form. Okay.
Okay.
Now, on the form, again, they came out with a brand new form this year. And I believe it's through stuff like me and others do. But we've always claimed exemption. But they never told you that there was an option that you could claim to be exempt from withholding, did they?
No.
Well, well, I'm telling you there is. And now it's actually on the form. Right at the bottom, if you claim exemption, check here. Okay, which means they can't see. Again, you're not going to believe this, but your employer cannot withhold any taxes without your written consent. The written consent is the W-4. Okay, will you put how many deductions you taking? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? You're asking for a benefit. Thus, now that's the contract the IRS uses. Say that entity now owes taxes. When you could have put exempt from taxes from day one, and they don't have a legal right to take it out. You have to give it to them. Do you see? They really don't have jurisdiction over you. You have to waive your rights and surrender jurisdiction to them. They're like a vampire. You have to let them in the door. They cannot come in. As crazy as this sounds again, you are really the one in control. They lead you to believe that they're the ones in control, but it's really you because you're either letting them in or you're going over there, you're doing something wrong that you don't know you're doing.
Yeah. That does make sense to me because in the context of, you know, I know this for a fact. Everything is based on free will. So what is mind control? It's a way to trick us, to make us believe that we have to consent to this, that, or the other. So we do, but technically, just like with the jab, well, you'll
Mhm.
lose your job, you can't travel, blah, 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 blah. But in the end, when it was all over and people said, hey, WTF, they said, oh, well, you had a choice.
Yes, that's their
So,
out. See, you see that they'll always say, "We didn't hold a gun to your head." Well, yeah, you did, but the lady in Texas that opened that wouldn't close her beauty shop, she ended up winning. The two guys in New Jersey with the gymnasium, they won their
yes.
case. I
Yes.
have two students now that worked for banks that they got fired. They've won the lawsuits. So now, yeah, later everybody's winning, but at the time, everyone felt they had to consent when in reality, what's her name? What was Reagan's Nancy Reagan? Just say no.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. I wasn't 100% on that.
Well, I'm just telling you that's the real rules of the game.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
will
yeah.
allow you to
So
say no.
to play the game of commerce, you do have to have the things
Entities.
that you need to have, and you have to sign the forms when you get employed. However, that you have to know what you're doing. So you can say no withholding in terms of taxes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Even
Okay.
if
And
they've
you
been
can say,
withholding for
I'm
10 years, even if they've been doing it for 10 years, you can change it.
okay.
But you need proof to send to the IRS that you have a legal ground to stand on. It isn't just that. You got to
Oh,
send them something to prove that I'm not liable. Okay.
okay. So let's talk about that. I mean, it might be more complicated than just this podcast, but
Um,
roughly, okay. So what do you send them?
so your birth certificate was created in their jurisdiction. Okay. It'll say state of Illinois, state of Florida at the top of a birth certificate, right? And
Yeah.
because the corporate state created it, it's in the territorial jurisdiction because the name, again, is in their jurisdiction. So you have to get that government and what that piece of paper, that birth certificate is actually a receipt, okay? And I'll get into that in a second, that you're a beneficiary of a trust. Because now it's in your possession. Beneficiary is use and possession of the asset. Okay. So it proves that there's a trust going on and it proves you're the beneficiary. So, but it's in the wrong jurisdiction. So we got to ask the government to put it in the union jurisdiction. Okay. Because if I can get it in the union jurisdiction, that means that name is not in their jurisdiction anymore. And now it's not taxable. Would that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to send it to, for me, I send it to Springfield, Illinois, Secretary of State. Will you please authenticate this in a non-Hague treaty? It's a one-page form. It costs $2. Okay. Sure, no problem. We're going to slap a piece of paper. We're going to seal it. Send it back to me in the mail. Now I got to send it to the State Department and get it done on a federal level. So now the feds have a one-page form. They only ask 4 questions, and you fill it out. You send it to them. They send it back. It's got Marco Rubio's signature on it today. Okay. And what they did is they took that document and put it in the original land constitutional jurisdiction. So now you have, and it's grommeted together. Okay. It's like your free pass, get out of jail free card. Okay. You're no longer in their jurisdiction, or that name is no longer in their jurisdiction. Because again, it's all about the name. Okay. So now then we take a copy of that with like a Declaration of Independence that we do, send it off to the Treasury Department, State Department, IRS, President, your Attorney General, and we all notify them we're not, that name is no longer in your jurisdiction. Okay, we'll still play the game. It's just you can't assume you have jurisdiction and that I'm the liable party anymore. I'm really the beneficiary. You're the servant. You're the trustee. You're supposed to be doing for what's my benefit according to natural law. You're the trustee of the trust. I'm the beneficiary. That's the way you set it up. I'm not doing that. But my proof is I have the birth certificate in my hand. That's proof I'm the beneficiary. Let me give you a small story as an example. And again, you're probably old enough to remember back in the day, there was no such things as plastic bags at the grocery store. Everything fit in like two big brown bags, right? Well, nowadays they might put two or three things. So you're walking out of the store with 20 or 25 bags of groceries now, right? It's ridiculous, but it's true, right? So you get home and you go, I want to make a ham sandwich, but I can't find the bread and the mayonnaise. What happened? Maybe I left it at the grocery store. Maybe I abandoned that property and they're sitting there waiting. They put it behind the desk. They're waiting for somebody to come back and make a claim
Mhm.
on that property, like the name. What do you have in your possession which would be evidence that that is your property and not anyone else's or even the store's property anymore. What do you
Right.
have that they gave you?
The receipt.
A receipt. A birth certificate is the receipt for all of this. It's the proof it's all yours and not theirs. Do you see what they actually gave you was something good? You just don't know what to do with it. Okay.
And that's a
But
doable process. It sounds like
yes,
there are forms and you can do actually do it. Okay.
I use their
Wow.
forms. I use their forms. There's a IRS form called a WABEN where you can claim you're beneficiary of the strawman trust. They have a one-page form for it. Okay. If you don't do it, they think they're the beneficiary. Do you see
Right.
again? They've set everything up as a default. The default level is in all in their benefit, but they left the back door wide open for you and I and everybody else. But you just have to know how and what to do.
Yeah. And
Yes.
that's very classic of the way they do everything. And then they laugh
Yes.
because we're too stupid
That's
to
exactly what they
actually,
say. If you're too
yeah,
stupid enough, you ask for the
yeah.
benefit, didn't know what you were getting, that's not our problem. That's how they look at us.
Wow. Hmm.
I
So,
mean,
I
it
mean,
makes
that's
sense.
good.
This is all
Yeah.
logical. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's actually, thank you for being so cogent and clear in your explanation. It actually is, it does make a lot of sense. Um, I've
You
never
can't
heard
just
it.
run around, right? You just can't run around and claim I'm a private man under God. It's, well, who are you? You're not saying whether you're the beneficiary because it's presumed you're the trustee. So when you get up in court and say I'm a man, they go, so what? What are you, mental? You need a mental evaluation. We already know you're a man. We already think you're the surety. We know you're a man. We know you're not it.
Yeah.
We're just looking for the surety.
Yeah.
You see
Yeah.
why people get put in the mental home for 3 days because you're real. All you're really not doing is saying I'm the beneficiary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Well, like
like
I said, I've never heard it explained so clearly. I've heard all these other things and they didn't really make a lot of sense to me, but
all right,
this
well,
does.
let
Okay.
me let me explain it spiritually. You believe in God, a creator. He sent down Jesus as the trustee so he could die for our sins so we could benefit and go to heaven. That's a trust agreement. All right. But in order
Okay.
to go to heaven, don't you have to make a declaration that you actually believe in him?
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Yes. Technically, yes. Just because you're here doesn't mean you're entitled to the benefits. You have to declare that you actually believe in order to get there. Okay.
Yeah.
That's trust law. Okay, why do you think our founding fathers made a Declaration of Independence? They were declaring themselves beneficiary of the land. Therefore, were entitled to be free.
Okay.
You see why it worked? Did the king, he just gave up and said, okay, it's your, see, he couldn't claim otherwise because they really were the beneficiaries of the trust that was set up for them. Do you see? He
Yeah.
couldn't say no. He had to agree with them and give them their independence.
Yeah. I hope that's something that as a human collective we come to in every arena where we just stand up and we say, I do not consent to
Consent.
this.
I do not consent. I do not consent.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're in court, they give you three chances to say no. Okay. Three chances. This is biblical. Okay. If you hire an attorney, you've waived your rights already. If you plead, you've waived. Okay. And then when they sentence you, they always say, is there anything you'd like to say before I sentence you? That's your third strike. Because if you say, wait a second, I'm not that entity, I'm a real man and whatever, then they can't convict you. They give you three chances. They look at it as you volunteer to go to jail because we gave you three shots at the apple and you just didn't say anything.
Mm.
I think you get it. I think you understand
Yeah,
what
I
you have to.
do. So that forms a question in my mind about the police and their jurisdiction over us. What about that?
Okay, so this is just what I do that works very, very well. Um, we accidentally lose our driver's license because, again, the signature on the driver's license, if it's not restricted, and I'll get into that, you've signed and it is assumed and implied that you're the trustee of that trust. Because really, it's like a pass that allows you to drive on the land, right? It's an implied trust. Well, it's actually expressed because you do sign it. Okay. So we sign it differently. We sign it as agent of record, which means beneficiary. I'll be glad to sign anything that you put in front of me as long as I can basically state on there that I'm the beneficiary, not the trustee. Okay. Once we do that, we do them a 2-page letter where, as a beneficiary, I'm now going to subrogate my rights. And as subrogee and surety, I don't want to be stopped. And if I'm stopped, I don't want to be detained. Okay. So you make demands as the beneficiary on the real trustee of the trust, the DMV, whoever has the DMV. Okay. So you're making a claim on the trust, just like they did, but you're showing them that you actually have the higher claim to the name that is actually the driver's license name. Okay. So whatever they do in the computer, this is what normally happens. 95% of the time, my students get pulled over. You give them the driver's license, they go back, they swoosh it, they scan it in their computer, and there's this like yellow border that comes up, says, do not detain. Okay. They get out of their car, they come back, usually within 3 minutes, and they say, have a nice day. Now, you didn't have to say anything. You made your claim on paper. You told them you're proper, you're in the office of the beneficiary, not the office of the trustee. And as crazy as it sounds, they abide by trust law because that's really what governs them. So you see who's really in control, them or me? The beneficiary is really always the one in control. You haven't exercised your rights as beneficiary. Okay, you think you're the trustee. Well, the trustee has the right to sue and the right to be sued on behalf of the trust. That's it. The beneficiary can be subrogated, redemption, stipulation, subrogation, and you get the legal rights. You get all of the rights if you claim you're the beneficiary of all of these things that they set up for us. See, it's a two-bladed sword for them and for us both. They think they're in control. They act like they're in control, but really we're in control. And they don't care, a small number of people understand and get this. They just need the majority to cooperate. That's really how they, base this on it. 2 out of every 3 people, they agree we're good. We don't care about the others. We don't need 100% compliance. What we need is the majority. Think like them. Think like them.
So what's registering your car? Is it the same like registering your child? Okay.
Exactly the same thing. You're splitting the title, you're placing the car title in trust. Now you get equitable title. I get a piece of paper that says I get to use it and I possess it. I could put a radio in it. I could change the color. I could paint it. But they must have the legal title, the controlling interest of the car, because they're the ones that say has to be registered, got to have insurance, and you got to have plates. And what happens if you don't? They seize the property. Do you understand? Because it's their property. It's not your car. I know you think it's your car, but it's not your car. Okay. No different than, did you see Game of Thrones, that movie at all?
I saw it a long time ago, yeah.
Okay. So serfdom, kingdom, I'm just using the land. I'm using the car. It's really their car. They have every right to pull it over. Now, if you really understand again how they're trained, they get behind you, they run the plates. If the plates come up into their system, then they can put their lights on. But only after that they've been given evidence that that car is in their jurisdiction. You see? And then what's the first thing out of their mouth? License, registration, insurance. Why? Because once you give them the license, now they think they have jurisdiction over the name on the license. So do you understand why they're trained? They have to have that license. And they'll take you to jail normally if you don't. If you're driving a car without a license in this state, you go to jail. Okay? So we cooperate with the system. We understand that it's a trust. We exercise our rights as the beneficiary of the trust with bank accounts, driver's license, passports, whatever they want to throw at us. I'll be glad to accept it under the condition that I'm just the user and I have no liability. In other words, I'll be glad to be the trust fund baby. I promise I'll be responsible, and if I don't, I'll have car insurance in case I'm not. I will act in a responsible adult manner. That's how I want you to be. Is just a responsible adult who understands the game, but you got to be responsible. You can't abuse it. Okay?
So I assume there's a similar remedy if you have registered your car to not have it be in their domain or possession
I,
anymore.
I re-registered in the name of the trust, the new game Monopoly game piece I have. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I'll
All right.
still use it, but when if something comes up, then I have a piece of paper and go, it's not your car anymore. It actually is out of your jurisdiction. And
Okay.
I guarantee you, when cops find out it's private property or a judge, they're going to give it back to you so fast your eyes are going to blink because they know what the difference between public and private property is. Okay. You just have to be able to give them a piece of paper to prove it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hmm. So let's talk about this because I hear it swirling around and talked about a lot. The uh, I think that in 1933, the United States went, and maybe the whole world went under martial law. I don't know if it's just in the US or not. And that changed the game. And then if you would also talk about the Federal Reserve and how maybe it relates to that, because from what I've looked into, the Federal Reserve seems to me, I don't know anything about this stuff, but it seems to me like it's a little bit of a insane thing because it's like they've inserted themselves and they're harvesting and profiting off money. It's like they put themselves in as the middleman, if I'm understanding it correctly, which I'm not sure I
Yes.
am, but
Yeah, they're like the mafia who says you got to pay me so
yes.
no one will break your windows. But if you don't pay me, I'm going to break your windows.
Yes. And that
Yes,
literally happens in Italy. You open a
yes,
business, they show up, they say, well, for this small fee every
yep.
month, we'll protect you. And if not, well,
Bad things are going to happen.
yes.
It's the same management style. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about Federal Reserve first. Well, first of all, yes, we went bankrupt in 1933. Okay, that's why the military occupation occurred, is because we were bankrupt. But that wasn't our first bankruptcy. Our first bankruptcy was actually 1789. Okay, when our Constitution was formed, it was a mortgage. Okay, of the mortgage of the revolutionary debt, which was 6 million livra. I'm going to say dollars just to make it easy to understand. Okay, so we borrowed $6 million from France to win the war. We formed the Articles of Confederation, and like politicians today, which are no better than the ones today, they borrowed another $12 million to run the government. Okay, so now, in fact, the Treaty of Peace. I have the Treaty of Peace right here, just in case you ever want to know. And three parties show up at the Treaty of Peace, 1783. England, the United States. We sent three lawyers: John Adams, John Jay, and John Adam, or Benjamin Franklin. So we sent three lawyers. And the Pope is there, a representative from the Pope. And you're going to say, what the hell's the Pope doing there? What's he got to do with this? Because he had a claim on the land. But okay. So at the 1783, Article 4, which I have just there, we agree, our representatives say, okay, we'll pay the debt. Okay. Now, back then, if you're not a country, personal debt, just like today, has a 7 year window. Like bankruptcies are good for 7 years, right? That's international banking laws, been on the books for over 1,000 years. Okay, so 1783, they go, okay, uh, we'll push that debt out, that's 6 million, but it's due in 1790. Okay, because that's 7 years from the time we signed the treaty. All right, so all the people running the new country know that the Bank of France we owe this money to. And if we don't have it in 1790, under the rules of bankruptcy, they can come and liquidate. They can basically just say, we're going to take New York, Virginia, and Georgia, or whatever they thought was appropriate. Under the international laws, this is what they can do. Okay, for debtors, you don't pay up. So companies or whatever, individuals, 7-year limit. So all of our people know this. We know, and again, we stupidly borrow another 12 million on top of the six. So now we owe 18 million. There's no way in sight that we can pay the bill when it's coming up. Okay. But by now, the Bank of England has bought the debt from the Bank of France, which you understand was the same family, it's the same Rothschild family. Okay. So, anyways, so we go, we better have this constitutional convention. We better figure out a way how we're going to save everything. Okay. What are we going to do? Okay. In law, a constitution, one of the definitions is a security, it's a mortgage. So the debt, the banker said, okay, if you form a country, I tell you what we'll do. We will push that debt off instead of 7 years, we'll push it off 70 years. Because when you're a country, again, this is international banking law. Now that you formed a country, you can push the debt out instead of 7 years, 70 years. Okay. All right. But there's a few conditions. Here we go with the free credit again, right? Because you understand banking that they got to have collateral, right? We'll loan you the money, but what are you going to give us to kind of hold that's worth a little bit just in case you don't pay, right? Laws are no different now than they were hundreds of years ago. So they go, I tell you what, if you give us legal title to all the federal land and buildings, you form a central bank and we'll agree to refinance the debt. We'll do a Chapter 11 bankruptcy and we'll redo it. We'll give you credit, we'll give you more credit, and we'll push this off 70 years. Okay. And they all said yes. Okay. Now in 1789, there were only 9 that ratified it. Then by 1791, the other 4. So all 13 ratify it by 1791. Guess what happens the second all 13 are on board as sureties that they agree to pay the debt they socialized the debt to everybody. Okay. We'll agree to pay. The first Federal Reserve Bank has a 20-year charter. Okay. All right. The people soon learn that they're robbing us. This is a no-go. We don't like it. 1791 plus 20 years brings us to 1811. Ooh, does something important happen around 1811? Oh, guess what? We go to war with England again in 1812. Okay. They purposely invade from Canada because we voted said we're not going to renew the charter. So they think they can force us because we got to borrow money for a war. Everybody's always got to borrow money for a war, right? It's all wars are bankers' wars. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. So of course we agree to be at peace after a year, but we'll agree, we'll give you another 20-year charter. Okay. But at the same time, when they came down here, in case you don't know, they burnt the original 13th Amendment. They went to the Philadelphia where the law, because the Capitol was there. The 13th Amendment, the original 13th said no lawyer can hold public office. Geez, you think that was important to get rid of? And so we had to give that up, and we had to say that we'd do another 20-year charter. Okay, so that's 1812. Goes 20 years, and of course the people find out this is crazy. All the money's going to the bankers. So Congress and Andrew Jackson is president at that time, running for president. And I don't know if you've ever said, his slogan was, I'm going to kill the banks. That was the slogan that he ran on. I'm not doing it. We are not doing it. And sure enough, by one vote, no central bank. Okay. The most prolific economy we ever had in our country's history was from 1824 to 1913 when there was no central bank. Now, let me give you an idea. At the time Jackson was president, sugar was 10 cents a pound. By the time 1913 comes around, it was 11 cents a pound. So do you see how stable an economy can be and why all the money in Europe came over here? because we didn't have the central bank and everyone knew that they could trust the money system here because it wouldn't get out of hand with inflation like it has in France and England and everywhere else where they were doing this. Okay. That's why we became the top country in the nation because all the money came our way. Okay. Now, 70 years plus, what do you call it? 1791 to 1861. Does something important happen around 1861? That's the Civil War. So are you seeing that there's these national distractions every time they want to reset the debt? So we go into Chapter 11 bankruptcy again. Lincoln, goes to them and they say, sure, we'll lend you the money. It's going to cost you 30%. But really, we need the other 20 states to sign on. There were 13 original states that signed in as surety to the debt. But since then, 20 new states have come around. And those 20 states are not legally liable for that debt of $90 million. So now it's $90 million. Okay. So the South says, are you crazy? We'll just form our own country. Why would we want to sign on to this? You're taxing us 80%. We're bearing the burden of all the taxes now. You're treating us like crap. I know they like slavery, but F you, we're out of here. Do you understand the real reason? That was the real reason is they didn't want to sign on to the debt. Okay. It was them against the bankers, what the real war was. Okay. Well, guess what? The South ends up losing the war. Okay. So there's another Chapter 11 bankruptcy that happens. Okay. So they get together, same thing. We will give you more credit, but we need more collateral. All right. Now we need the legal title to the state buildings and the state land. Now, I forgot to tell you, when they get that on the federal buildings, they have to pay rent and they have to pay property tax. That's what the legal title in the hands of the bankers does. You got to pay taxes and you got to pay rent. Remember the serfdom example I gave you?
Yeah,
It's that way
yeah.
every time something gets placed in trust. So now the states, well, everybody, of course, says we're all broke. Of course, we're going to agree to all of this. Okay. And then the bankers say, we'll push it on another 70 years. Okay. Which gets around 1929. Does something happen around when the debt comes due again? Another national catastrophe. Are you seeing a pattern? Yes. Okay. So now, 1913, they form the Federal Reserve. They finally get that back in. The Federal Reserve says, we're going to print this money so you don't have to, but we're going to charge you 6%. And you know what? We don't want to get paid in Federal Reserve notes. The contract says you got to pay us in gold notes. We don't want that crazy monopoly money. We actually want, the real stuff. So it
It's
only took
percent and they get it in gold, but they
gold
print
certificates, which means they have a
paper.
claim on our nation's gold. Okay, so in 20 years, we're out of gold.
Wow.
Okay, the backing of the money, or we don't have enough so everyone can be redeemed. That's really was the issue. We had gold, but there wasn't enough because before you could take a $20 bill into a bank and by law, they had to give you an ounce of gold if you wanted. It was redeemable. Okay. But the bank said, we don't have enough gold anymore to do that. We got to reorganize the debt. We got to go into Chapter 11 again for the third time. Okay. So this is all you got to do is look to the past if you want to know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
This has been done before. Same thing. Some distraction has to happen so they get everybody in a panic so they can pass this legislation where nobody's looking. So you're not pointing the finger at the government and the bankers. That's what this is all about. Okay. So they come in, then it wasn't just Federal Reserve notes. Now it's actually monopoly money. Now it's fiat money. Okay. And the backing of the fiat is the pledge of the taxes on the birth certificated, all caps person, their future earnings. That's what the collateral. So we collateralize the federal land and buildings, we collateralize the state land and buildings. The only thing left with the people, but you can't do that because that's against the Constitution, right? Amendment 13, no slavery. But you know what? We can create this entity that's their name and make a claim on their name. That gives us collateral to print more monopoly money. You see, again, it's just The same game just gets played over and over again. Okay. So now that leads us to 1999 when that 70-year thing is up. Does something dramatically happen around 1999? Well, 9/11, 2001. Okay. Everything's got to be, all done, new legislation, Patriot Act, blah, blah, blah. Now, the whole time, you always get like a 20 or 25-year grace period to restructure the debt. But international bankruptcy law really says after 3 bankruptcies, then you're supposed to, it's a jubilee and you wash the country, the debt is forgiven. Because you get to a point where you can't pay the interest anymore. And really, that's where we're at. Okay. 6% of $38 trillion is over $2 trillion a year, tax free to the families that own the central bank. Tax free because they're a private corporation.
We
Okay.
wonder how they got so rich.
So I'm telling you, it's a mathematical certainty that the money will be restructured. They'll come in with a new money system again. This is not new. Won't be the first time. This will just be the fourth time in our history. But it's the same game. Oh, let's start World War III. Everybody, it's Putin's fault. It's Iran's fault. They won't notice what we're going to do. And what we're doing is really we're centralizing the wealth to our hands and more for us, less for them. You you understand the game.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I have looked back in history and you're really shining a light on the financial aspect, but I've just seen in a more general way that every time they want to go in a new direction, a new reset, they have to destroy the old order and I know wars are somebody behind the scenes is looking at a chessboard and they're like, oh, I think I'll do this war here with this. They fund both sides. It's all,
Yes.
yeah, it's all
Yes. Parts.
orchestrated behind the scenes.
I forgot this part of it. This is Senate Report 93-549, written in November of 1973. The very first sentence. Since March 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. In fact, the national emergency declared by President Roosevelt in 1933, blah, blah, blah. These proclamations give force 470 provisions of federal law. It gives the president extraordinary powers, ordinarily exercised by Congress, which affect the lives of American citizens in a host of all-encompassing manners without reference to normal constitutional processes. Okay? Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, assign military forces abroad. This is why Congress doesn't declare war. Since 33, the president had the power to do it himself under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Okay? Restrict travel, no fly list, plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. So you have to go back, listen to FDR's speech. About 20 minutes in, he'll say, what I need to handle the emergency because of the Depression is I need broad executive powers as if we were at war. As if we were at war. And then if you read our Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, let me just get this for you. States is known as the suspension clause, prohibits the federal government suspending the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, and the only exception is when the public safety requires it. Okay? Lincoln was the first one to put people in jail. Okay? Without a warrant, without whatever, with no jury trial. This is not new. Okay? Taking him to Guantanamo. This is just a different version of that. Okay?
So the Patriot Act is another version of that.
Right. Because is as if we were at war, the executive too, federal government gets these extraordinary powers that normally would be unconstitutional because it's a time of an emergency. It's a national emergency. How many national emergencies are we under? Let alone how many have been declared in the last 50 years? Unbelievable amount. They have to do this in order to get the powers, okay, to sanction Iran, to take their money, to sanction Russia, to take their money. It's all under Trading with the Enemy Act of 1933. Okay. We're under now executive two power, commander in chief. That's why we call it a martial law. It's a soft martial law. You don't see troops in the street. You don't need to. The executive two, the president is control of everything, basically. I'll give you an example. He just created Doge out of right. He takes one of his cabinet members, fires him, makes another position where he doesn't ask Congress. He's the commander in chief. He can do whatever he wants. Okay. The CIA, the FDA, the CDC, any of those government agencies that were created since 93 were done under executive power. They weren't done under the Constitution. They're not constitutional. Okay. If we ever went back to the Republic, this is how you would know. They have to close their doors. They have to be voted on by the Congress and then by the president in order to be official. Okay. And also, if you don't know, all the presidents up and including FDR were inaugurated on March 4th. Okay. But that doesn't sound right. Our presidents are inaugurated on January 20th, aren't
Yeah,
they?
yeah,
Well, the commander in chief is inaugurated on January 20th. The president, if we go back to the Republic, it will change and go back to March 4th. You see, something dramatic happened in 33. Basically, a new government took over. A democracy is now running everything instead of the Republic. Now, they couldn't get rid of the Republic. It's still here, but they're hiding it. Okay. So you can't get your constitutional rights in court unless you know how to access a special court. It's there, just like everything else. It's behind the hidden door. Where's the door? No one's going to tell you where the door is, but the door is there. Okay. That's why January 6ers. Okay. That's why anybody, if you know of anybody that's been, it's like the Constitution doesn't exist. Well, it
yeah,
really doesn't, unless
yeah,
you can claim you're entitled to those rights and therefore you want to be in front of an Article 3 judge in a court of equity. Okay. Otherwise, you can't get your constitutional protections. Okay. So it's there, it's just hidden. Everything is hidden, like
yeah.
it always has been. Like the
Everything is
knowledge
hidden.
is
Yeah,
all hidden. And that's really what a cult means. Wouldn't you would agree?
yes, absolutely. Wow. Oh, this has been one of my favorite interviews that I've done. I've learned so much. You've really clarified some things that I had floating in my head, but I couldn't quite knit together. I know this is going to be so helpful for people who are watching this, and I know that you take on students, you teach people the remedies for these
Yes.
things. So tell us a little bit about how people can find you. And I will have these links in the description as well, but just let people know kind of how that works.
Well, I'm private. I'm not public. So I do private teaching. And yes, I try to teach you to understand this so I help you find the solutions, what you're looking for. If you want to be free from taxes, you want to be free of government control, I can show you how to do that. Okay. My uh, email is mrbeneficiary@gmail.com. Do you understand why I use Mr. Beneficiary now?
Yeah, I do now.
And so when I go to court, which has been a long time because, they get tired of me winning, they don't ask me back. Okay, that's what I asked them to refer to me as. I'm not Mr. Wetland, I'm Mr. Beneficiary, because that's all that counts. You're just looking for the beneficiary, the trustee. You don't really care who's who. But the trust is going on here, so I'm claiming that chair first before the other guy does. Okay, and I mean, I normally can get the judge to say okay, and then the case just ends immediately. Right? But I give you stuff
Brilliant.
to read. I want you to read books. I have articles. Then we talk about making a Declaration of Independence for us, just like our founding fathers did. Because they wanted to be free of the tyranny. If you ever read the Declaration of Independence, they list 27 things that the government is doing wrong, or the king. And you could almost put every single one of those things they complained about and apply it today. They're doing the same thing. Okay. So just like I try to explain to me, you have to declare your belief in God. You have to declare that you're free of them. Our founding fathers did it, it worked. We're going to follow the exact same procedure. Okay. We're going to notify them that we're declaring our independence. And then once we do that, we record it. Okay. So we use their system again. We put it in their computers, and then we send a copy to the government agencies. And anytime we have an issue or that we form a trust with the banks, with the DMV, then we notify them again that, hey, just want to let you know that we're the beneficiary in this agreement here. Therefore, we have rights. And you know what? No, you can't take our money and invest it for us, Mr. Banker. You got to actually set that aside on a different ledger. And you know what? You got to give it back to me whenever I want, because that's what a trust really is. Because under the Dodd-Frank bill in 2008, today, if you don't stipulate on special deposit, you get general deposit, which means you just gave them your money and they do not legally have to give it back to you. Did you know that?
No.
Yes. That's what Dodd-Frank and the crash was all about, was reset the banking laws. Now, again, the back door is, wait a second, I don't agree. I'm really the beneficiary in this relationship. Therefore, I'm going to exercise that. And therefore, you're going to be the trustee. And this is the way it's really going to be. Okay. And believe it or not, they will do it because they abide by natural trust law. The hardest thing to maybe is to convince people they're such crooks that they will obey a law, but they actually will, because under the system, they can be removed from office under a breach of trust. That's the one thing you can get rid of: a politician, a cop, a mayor. You charge them with breach of trust, and their lawyers will tell them, do you understand that you could lose your job? Okay. You be removed. You become unbonded. Then the insurance company is going to say, you can't work. Sorry, you're out. Okay. Because your claim is really going to be against the insurance company. And insurance companies follow trust law all day long. They do subrogation on a daily basis. They know what trust law is.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me on a parallel track where I know that um, I call them the creatures, the people, the psychopaths that run the world, they still have to abide by free will and natural law.
Yes,
So they get very tricksy and they say that you're choosing the harm that they're doing to you. Technically, you are, but they're very careful. They live in a gray area. They don't just violate it, they can't, because
they
there will be
can't.
consequences on them.
They
Yes.
can't come into our house without us letting them in. They
Right.
can't come into our jurisdiction because they're forbidden. The separation of powers of the Constitution says so.
Yeah.
Your Article 2 can't come over to my Article 3. You can come up to the fence, but that's it. You have to get me to come into there, across the river. Okay. They try to scare you into coming into their jurisdiction. They cannot come into ours. Again, there's a Supreme Court case that says that. They cannot, they are limited to their own jurisdiction and cannot encroach upon the others.
So my last question before we wrap up is, I know different countries are different, but is the basic similar thing able to occur in every country?
Yes, because it's being
Okay.
run under corporate administrative law. Have you ever heard of that? Administrative law is Article 1, not Article 3. All our rights are under Article 3. So Article 1 is Admiralty, law of the sea, territorial law. Okay.
Okay.
You're agreeing to be in their Article 1 courts unless you say otherwise. You say, I don't belong here. You see what I mean? This is not where this is not my jurisdiction. I'm in the wrong court. So I have to do a removal of warrant for jurisdiction, or you have to dismiss this case because you don't have jurisdiction over me. I don't have jurisdiction over you. This is not the right area to settle this dispute. All trust disputes are supposed to be settled in equity, which is Article 3. So you have to get them to see that there's a trust going on. If they agree that there's a trust, that will automatically move it to the right court. You see?
Okay.
It's all
Well,
about trust law.
ultimately, this is rather good news that we do have a very real doable. Yeah, it takes some learning and breaking of some mind control that we've all
Yes,
been in, but it can be done. And wow, what would the world look like if the majority of us did this?
they wouldn't have control over us.
Yeah,
The federal
which,
government wouldn't be as large, or wouldn't be, the IRS would probably go away because they would
yeah,
know that people know that they really have no power over them. Because
yeah.
everybody's going to say, no, thank you. Appreciate it, the offer, but no, thank you.
No, thanks. I think I won't give you a third of my income. Just
Because I
saying.
don't have to. I don't really have to unless I volunteer to do it.
Yeah,
So, no thanks.
yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for joining me today and for this amazing information. And we'll put your links in the description. And I, for one, definitely want to become your student and learn from you. So thank you. And do you have any last words that you want to leave for people
Sure,
as we
sure.
sign off?
I'll leave you with this, that once you see this, it's like you just have to hold the mirror up in front of you. That in a way, yes, you were deceived, yes, you were lied to, but you know what? Now that you know, you're the problem and you're the solution. You have all the power. Okay. Have you seen the Wizard of Oz movie?
Yes.
Okay. So at the very end, Dorothy misses the ride, the balloon ride from the professor to go back home, right? So Glinda the Good Witch comes flying down and don't cry, Dorothy. What does she say? Dorothy, you've had the power all along. You just didn't know you had it. All you got to do is click your heels three times together and you'll be there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm telling you the same thing. You've always had the power. You just didn't know it.
Yes.
But you got to look at
Amen.
yourself. Stop blaming them. Focus your anger, whatever, onto how do I fix it? Because only you can fix it. Everybody got into it by birth certificate, one by one. There is no mass exodus. There is a way, but we won't get into that. But you really just got to get out of one by one. That's the way
Yeah.
you got in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a message I always give in a different way. The most empowering thing we can realize is that it's us. We're the ones who can get us out of this pickle that we're in globally in every way, shape, and form. They're not going to stop doing what they're doing, but we
Correct.
have a choice and we need to exercise that choice.
Right. The only limitations you have are the limits you place on yourself.
Absolutely. Amen to that. All
Right?
right. Well, thank you so much. And
It's very nice talking to you.
we'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Thanks again.